Welcome. This video is going to show you every detail you need to know to change the spark plugs and coil packs on your Toyota Camry. Now, if you're wondering what the tools are that you might need, what the techniques are, the actual how-to of how to change this, and finally what the torque values are when you're putting it all back together, this video will cover that in great detail. First, let's address the applicable models. The model years are 2018 through 2023 Toyota Camrys with a 2.5-liter four-cylinder engine. First up is tools. Here we'll show you every tool needed to change the spark plugs and coil packs on your Camry. Now we have two torque wrenches here. This is the older style beam torque wrench and the newer style clicker torque wrench. Either one works. You might also need a screwdriver in case the plugs are giving you a hard time coming off. We have a 3/8 ratchet and a 1/4 inch ratchet. Particularly like these ratchets, these are the gear wrench, and the neat part about them is the head swivels 180 degrees, so you get it to whatever angle you want. And once you break the bolt loose, you just kind of put it on there and it works sort of like a screwdriver. By the way, these are really great gifts for Father's Day if you're looking for something to get somebody. We have about a foot long 3/8 extension and this 14mm spark plug socket that I just picked up today from Advanced. The old spark plug socket size was 5/8. It's not going to work for the newer cars. We also have a 1/2 inch by 3/8 adapter used because the torque wrenches are 1/2 inch and the sockets and extensions are 3/8. 8mm 1/4 inch drive and a 1/4 inch extension to take off the coil pack bolts. And finally, nickel graph, which is a high temp anti-seize that we're going to be using on the spark plugs to make sure they go in and out easier. Now, I think putting links to all these things on the description is going to make it a little too busy. So if you're interested in any of these tools or products, I will provide links on the associated website page at lifewithmadmike.com. Next up is the techniques, which you could also think of as the nitty-gritty do-it-yourself how-to section, where we're going to show you actually how to do everything. Now, if this is your first time out, meaning you're relatively new at doing this type of mechanical work, you need to understand that the primary way to get good at something is to first be bad at doing that something. So if you want to be eventually good at it, you have to suck at it first. So embrace the suck, come on along. You can do this, just take your time, be meticulous, and follow along. We'll show you everything you need to know. First thing we're going to do is remove this foam engine cover. Really don't know what purpose it serves, but if it makes the engineers happy, I guess they made it for us. So just slip your fingers underneath there and pull that off. Underneath the bottom, you'll see there are 3 female sockets, and on the engine there's 3 male plugs that sit up that actually hold the thing in place. Put that off to the side, and now that exposes our coil packs on top. There are 4 coil packs, one for each spark plug, and each one has its own electrical connector on the top. So we're going to start with removing the electrical connectors. So there's a tab at the top of each electrical connector that locks it in and keeps it from vibrating off. First, you have to push that down with your thumb, and then you can try and jiggle the connector off. If it doesn't come off easily in the first shot, that's where your screwdriver comes in. So you slip the screwdriver like this in between the top of the connector and the coil pack, and then slowly turn it. You'll see it pushes the connector off. Once you get it to move a little bit, pulls right off, and you're ready to move on. Next step is going to be to remove the bolts holding down the coil packs. This is an 8mm head bolt. We're using a 1/4 inch drive, and first you break it loose. Then, like I say, you can spin it up, use it like a screwdriver. That's why I kind of like these ratchets so much. Now, next thing to be careful of is be extremely meticulous when you're dealing with these things so you don't lose them. The Camry has a nice small area between the windshield and the gasket for the hood. I like to put the bolts up in here. It's very convenient. Next is we're going to grab the coil pack, twist and pull, and that's removed. Time to go after these spark plugs. Now, as I said before, these new spark plugs are a 14mm design, not the traditional 5/8 you'd find in your typical socket set. But you could use, if you wanted to, a 14mm extended socket to loosen them up. The only problem with that is you'd have to fish them out with a magnet, and then it's another problem to put them back in. So in this case, I'm going to say, bite the bullet, spend the extra couple bucks. It won't break the bank. Just go get the correct socket, the 14mm spark plug socket. It's got a magnet in it, so it holds the thing in place for putting it in and out. Makes life so much better. Okay, so use the 1 foot extension. The 2 foot extension's just really for show at this point. You couldn't use it for anything anyway. So 1 foot extension, put that on the socket, drop that into the spark plug hole, put your ratchet on, break it loose. And once it's loose, we're just going to keep spinning until we get it out. Um, you can see the way the extension is flexing. How the flex joint on there makes it much more convenient than having to have a rigid thing to worry about. As long as you're in the right ballpark, the spark plug socket will spin inside the hole. And once you get her loose, we're going to pull it out and then we'll take a quick look at it. Now, there was a time back in the day when everyone would pull out a spark plug and do what's called reading a spark plug. And when you read the spark plug, you take a look at the end, and although you can't see it too well here, this one has a light brown to grayish color on there, which means it's running just perfect. There's no fouling, there's no excessive gas on it, there's no excessive oil in it. So that's a good indication that the engine is still healthy after 100,000 miles. Next, we're going to get ready to reinstall our new spark plug. But first, we're going to apply a little bit of anti-seize to it. You could argue the necessity of the anti-seize, but it's always better to have it than to not have it. And because it's a Toyota, you might actually be doing this 2 or 3 more times. So a little dab will do you, a little schmutz on one side of the threads. Doesn't have to be completely all the way around. As you thread it in, it will work its way around and into the threads. After that, we're going to load the spark plug into our 14 millimeter spark plug socket and install that back onto our extension. And we're ready to go down with that. Now, if you're new to mechanics and this is the first time you're installing spark plugs, what you're going to want to do is make absolutely certain that you don't cross thread it. So the way to make this happen is once you install it, looking down on it, clockwise would be to tighten it. But in order to make sure it's lined up correctly, you actually want to go the opposite way, which is counterclockwise. So you're going to carefully turn it counterclockwise. You'll hear a click, and you'll feel very small of the spark plug will drop in. That's where the threads are actually matching. Once you turn it backwards, you hear the click and you feel the small drop. And you can turn it backwards a number of times. You'll hear it go click, click, click every time the threads pass each other and drop in. Then you can start turning it clockwise to actually install it. And once you start the installation process, you should get a few turns where you don't feel a large increase in the torque. If you start to make a turn and the torque increases, the amount of twist you need to keep it going increases quickly, just stop what you're doing. You might be cross-threading it. But if you've done it correctly with backing it out in reverse and then going forward, you should have a very smooth installation. So now we've come to part 3 of what could be considered the holy trinity of do-it-yourself. We've covered the tools, we've covered the techniques on disassembly anyway, and now we're moving on to the actual torque values. So, a necessary first question is, what is torque? So that'll lead us to what's next up, which is the torque tutorial. So if you're not familiar with what torque is, this will be a quick lesson, but still a very important one because you always hear people talking about torque and what is torque and torque, torque, torque. So torque is a measure of the amount of twisting force exerted. And in this case, it would be on the spark plug or the bolts for the coil packs, for example. It is measured in units of inch pounds, foot pounds, or Newton meters. So to tighten a bolt, you apply torque to make it spin and tighten. Think of torque as how much force you use to tighten or loosen a bolt. Now, in a nutshell, the two units that determine torque are the distance or moment arm and the force in pounds or newtons. You multiply these two together and you get your actual torque applied. If you look at the diagram above, you'll see from the bolt, there's a large arrow moving to the right. That's the distance or moment arm. You could also think of that as the length of the wrench that you're using to tighten the bolt from the bolt to the handle. Going straight down is force in pounds or newtons. That's how much push or pull on the wrench you have to use, depending on whether you're trying to loosen or tighten the bolt. Multiply those two together, and you actually get your final torque value. So you can get different torque values with different distances by changing the amount of force. 1 foot times 15 pounds is 15 pounds of force. 2 feet times 7.5 pounds is also 15 pounds of force. And finally, 3 foot times 5 pounds will still get you 15 pounds of force. So there's torque in a nutshell. All right, so now that we have our spark plugs lightly installed and we understand torque, we're ready to go ahead and torque the spark plugs. So once you install these by hand, you're going to run them down on a very light torque. When they bottom out, the torque required to turn them will go up a lot. At that point, we're going to put on our torque wrench, set to 15 foot-pounds, and we're going to tighten it until we hear a click. And unfortunately, this isn't the original audio for the video because of technical reasons, so you can't really tell, but there were some clicks there, and that's the 15 foot-pounds that you need. So from here, we're next going to put in the coil packs. Now, unless you've had problems with, say, an intermittent miss somewhere in the engine, there's really no reason to replace these at this point. But should you ever get to the point where you have to, this video shows you how, and this is the point where you would swap in the new ones. Once that's in, you take your time to line it up. You're going to reinstall the 8mm bolt, reverse counterclockwise first, till it clicks, then spin it in by hand and make sure that it's not cross-threaded. And then we go back to our wrench, screw it in with a screwdriver till the torque gets up, and now we're going to tighten it up until it bottoms out. Now this small wrench is about 6 inches long, so for a 5.5 pounds, 6 inches is a half a foot times about 10 pounds gives us our 5 foot-pounds. If you're not sure about it, you're better off using a torque wrench. If, on the other hand, you've been doing it for 50 years, for a hold-down bolt like this, you'd probably be just fine doing what I'm showing you right here. Now, the other 3 cylinders are just like the first one that we did, so rather than sit here and watch paint dry, we're going to speed this up so we can get through it quickly and just get to the end of the video. If you want to, you could always slow it down and watch it, whatever makes you happy. I mean, I suppose people like feet fetishes too, and I don't quite understand that either, but hey, do whatever makes you happy, man. It's all good. Okay, we're in the home stretch now. All that's left to do is to put the individual plugs back to the individual coil packs. Once that's all done, you want to get your beauty cover piece of foam here. And easiest way to do it is find the female part in the back, match it up with the male plug sticking up. Once you can get that back one to go on first, you'll feel it snap into place, and then you can get the 2 in front down. And with that, Bob's your uncle. We're all done here. Congrats, you made it to the end, and unless you're extremely committed to the status quo, Dollar to Donut says you actually learned something. I mean, that is the point of this after all. Links to the main parts used or shown are in the description section below the video, and also on the website page for this video at the lifewithmadmike.com website. Also on the website are links to some of the most important tools used or their current equivalent, mostly because some of the tools I use have not been made for decades. Just like every other video on the planet, now is the time for me to grovel for likes, shares, comments, and subscribes. Please, for the love of God, like, share, comment, and subscribe. Not only because it helps me beat the dark, unseen YouTube algorithm monster, but because I'm really needy. Seriously, though, it does help me in my mission and doesn't cost you a thing.